he broke the Mafia's only rule. Our next true story is about a man who was willing to do anything for money, including breaking the Mafia's one and only rule. This is the story of Frank Castellano. In 1968, a New York City mobster named Paul Vario was looking for someone to take care of his finances while he went away on a little vacation. You see, Paul had just been released from prison after serving time for armed robbery, and he didn't want to go back. Unfortunately, there was a hit out on him, and Paul was worried that someone would kill him before he could get to safety. To avoid this fate, he needed someone to pay his debts and collect his money while he was gone. Since he was a made man in the Lucchese crime family, it had to be someone trustworthy, someone who wouldn't talk to the police. Someone like Frank Castellano. At the time, Frank was one of the best accountants in New York City. He was highly sought after by the city's wealthiest people. But despite all the riches he handled, Frank himself wasn't rich at all. In fact, he lived in a small studio apartment with peeling paint and leaky pipes. Even so, he turned down offers from several mob families to become their accountant. That was until Paul Vario came along. One day, Paul visited Frank in his office and asked him to take over his financial affairs while he was gone. Frank hesitated, but when Paul mentioned the hefty sum of $40,000 per month salary, he was sold. From that day on, Frank became the mobster's eyes and ears on the street, paid his associates, and collected money from his businesses. The thing is, not only was Frank good at his job, he was also very frugal. Unlike most mobsters who like to flaunt their wealth, Frank kept his money close and saved as much as he could. In less than 2 years, he bought a beautiful house in a wealthy neighborhood and drove around in a brand new Cadillac. But no one knew what he was really up to. While he was managing Paul's business affairs, Frank was also secretly stealing from him. As time went on, his monthly salary increased to $100,000. But even with that much money, Frank was never satisfied. He wanted more. And unlike other mobsters, he knew exactly how to get it. After all, he was an accountant. Every day he would take money from the mobster's various businesses and stash it in banks under false names. Eventually, he had stolen millions of dollars from his boss. But it wasn't easy keeping secrets in the Mafia. Soon enough, other mobsters started noticing the money missing from their businesses. They confronted Paul about it, but he had no idea what they were talking about. See, Paul had come out of prison owing a lot of money to other mob families. So when he found out that Frank was stealing from him, he wasn't all that surprised. In fact, he was kind of happy about it, because it meant that he didn't have to pay back those debts. However, the other mob bosses weren't happy about it. They threatened Paul, demanding that he get them their money back. And even though Paul swore he couldn't get it back, they didn't believe him. So he offered them a deal. He told them he would personally lead them to the man who stole from them if they gave him some time to prepare. The other bosses accepted his offer and waited for him to make the delivery. Meanwhile, Frank was living the life of luxury. He had everything money could buy: expensive clothes, jewelry, and cars, a big house, and a beautiful wife. The only thing he didn't have was peace of mind. He was constantly afraid of getting caught. And when Paul called him into his office one day and told him to pack his bags, he knew his time was running out. When Frank got to the meeting place, he saw all the top mob bosses waiting for him. Then they all got into separate cars and followed him to his house. Once they got there, Frank tried to run, but the mobsters were faster than him. They dragged him out of the house and brought him to the backyard where they tied him to a chair. Now, the first rule of the Mafia is don't steal from your boss. It's considered the worst offense a member can commit. And the punishment for it is usually very severe. In Frank's case, the bosses wanted to make an example out of him. They wanted everyone to know that they don't tolerate thieves in their ranks, so they tortured him for hours, trying to find out where he hid the money. But Frank wouldn't tell them. He was a nobody compared to these men. If he gave them any information, they would kill him and take the money for themselves. So he stayed silent. And even though he suffered through unimaginable pain, the mob bosses still couldn't get the information they wanted. So eventually, they decided to kill him. They took him out into the woods behind the house and shot him multiple times. Then they buried him in a shallow grave and left him there. The next morning, Frank's wife reported him missing. She told the police that her husband had received a threatening phone call the night before, and she was worried he might have been kidnapped. When the police found his body, they immediately started investigating the Mafia. They questioned several mobsters, but none of them said anything. After all, they weren't going to help the police catch the men who killed Frank. So the case went cold, and the mob bosses thought they had gotten away with murder. However, a few weeks later, a man named Roy Demio came forward with information about the killing. You see, Roy was a low-level mobster who had recently become an informant for the FBI. He told the police everything he knew about the murder, implicated several mob bosses in the crime. With this new evidence, the police were able to arrest and convict the men who killed Frank. One of them was Paul Vario. At first, he tried to deny his involvement in the murder, but when the other mobsters started turning on him, he confessed to everything. He was sentenced to 100 years in prison, where he spent the rest of his life. The other mobsters involved in the murder also received long prison sentences. As for Frank, he may have been dead, but his death helped bring down one of the most powerful crime families in America. Mafia boss fears for his life. A powerful mafia boss is so worried about a possible assassination attempt that he has taken drastic measures to protect himself. He surrounds himself with bodyguards wherever he goes, and has even installed bulletproof glass in his home. What's the name of the mafia boss, and what's he so afraid of? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Another mafia murder. Mafia is a dangerous world where betrayals are commonplace, and murders are often the result. A powerful mafia boss has been assassinated, and his killers are still at large. What happened to the victim, and who could be responsible for his death? Let's investigate. Michael Franzese was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1932. He grew up in a poor Italian-American neighborhood and was the son of a mafia boss. From a young age, Michael knew he wanted to follow in his father's footsteps and become a mafia boss himself. He joined the Colombo crime family at age 17 and quickly rose through the ranks. Throughout his career as a mafia boss, Franzese amassed a fortune through illegal gambling, loan sharking, and extortion. However, his criminal activities eventually caught up with him, and he was arrested on racketeering charges in 1985, facing a lengthy prison sentence. Franzese agreed to cooperate with the government and became an informant. In 1994, he was released from prison and entered the Witness Protection Program. However, Franzese's former associates were not happy about his betrayal and vowed revenge. On April 11, 2000, Michael Franzese was attending a friend's funeral in Queens, New York. As he stood by the grave, a gunman approached him and fired several shots. Franzese was hit in the chest and arm and managed to stumble inside a nearby house where he collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead on arrival. The motive behind the murder was clear. Franzese had been killed by his former associates in the Colombo crime family for betraying them and cooperating with the government. The murder was never solved, and the person responsible for ordering the hit remains unknown. Who was Michael Franzese? Michael Franzese was a powerful mafia boss who amassed a fortune through illegal activities such as gambling, loan sharking, and extortion. Despite his success, his criminal activities eventually caught up with him, and he was arrested on racketeering charges in 1985, facing a lengthy prison sentence. He agreed to cooperate with the government and became an informant. However, his former associates in the Colombo crime family were not happy about his betrayal and vowed revenge. On April 11, 2000, Franzese was attending a friend's funeral when he was gunned down by a hitman and killed. The murder was never solved, and the person responsible for ordering the hit remains unknown. What's your opinion? What do you think about the way Frank was killed? Was it a fair punishment for what he did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.